The phone rang at the precise moment I felt I was about to break. It was a sweltering Friday afternoon in Los Angeles, and I had just survived a grueling 3-hour board meeting. My head was still buzzing with numbers and charts. Seeing the unknown number on the screen, I was tempted to ignore it, but some dark premonition urged my finger to press the answer button. "Hello, this is Sarah," I said, my voice a bit hoarse. On the other end was the voice of a stranger, a man whose calm, steady tone sent a chill down my spine. "Excuse me, am I speaking with Sarah Thompson?" "Yes, this is she. How can I help you?" "Ma'am, this is the California Highway Patrol. We are currently at the scene of a particularly serious traffic accident on the I-5 freeway. The victim was the driver of a white Tesla Model Y, license plate 9KXY. My heart skipped a beat. That was my car, the companion I drove to work every single day. But I hadn't driven it this morning. This morning, I had personally handed the keys to someone else. My throat tightened, making it incredibly difficult to speak. The victim. How are they?" "The situation is critical, ma'am. They've been transported to Cedars-Sinai for emergency care. We need a family member to come for identification and to provide a statement immediately." "Are you a relative of the victim?" I couldn't hear the officer's words clearly after that. A ringing filled my ears, and the world around me seemed to fade into a void. The phone slipped from my hand, landing silently on the thick office carpet. I stood frozen in the middle of my spacious office, staring out at the city through the floor-to-ceiling windows. The traffic below was still a bustling river of cars, the people still hurrying along, but my world had ground to a halt. I tried to take a deep breath to calm myself, but a sharp pain shot through my chest as if someone were squeezing my heart. Shaking, I picked up my phone and dialed my husband, Tom. He answered after 2 rings, his voice tinged with sleep. "Hey, honey, you caught me napping." "Where are you?" I asked, my voice trembling uncontrollably. "I'm at home, just resting a bit." "What's wrong, Sarah? You sound strange." "The car. An accident. The I-5. Cedars-Sinai." I couldn't form a complete sentence. "What? Sarah, speak clearly!" Tom sounded alarmed now. "Get to Cedars-Sinai, right now." "I'm on my way," I said and hung up, unable to utter another word. I grabbed my purse and bolted from the office without a word to anyone. I didn't dare to cry, didn't dare to think of the worst-case scenario. All I could do was run, like a madwoman, out of the building and hail the first taxi I saw. "Cedars-Sinai, and please hurry," I urged the driver, my voice cracking. Throughout the drive, her image flashed in my mind, her radiant smile, her playful voice as she'd asked to borrow the car this morning. "Sarah, can I please borrow your car? I have to meet a friend. I promise I'll be back early." I had hesitated, but then Tom had chimed in. "Oh, let her take it, honey. She said it's important," and so I had agreed. If only I had said no. The taxi screeched to a halt in front of the hospital entrance. I tossed a bill to the driver and sprinted inside, heading straight for the emergency room. The air was thick with the scent of antiseptic and pain. I saw Tom already there, waiting. He was still in his loungewear, his tall frame looking out of place, his face pale. When he saw me, he rushed over and grabbed my shoulders. "Sarah, what happened? What's going on?" But his eyes, there was something strange in them. Beyond the worry, there was a flicker of panic, a bewildering confusion, as if he wasn't just afraid for the victim, but terrified of something else entirely. I shook my head, too exhausted to answer. We stood in silence before the doors of the emergency room, the passing time suffocatingly slow. Soon, I saw Eleanor, my mother-in-law, rushing toward us. As soon as she reached us, she blurted out, "How is she? How is she?" Her voice was also filled with panic. I couldn't understand how she had gotten here so quickly. Her house was miles away. And why did she ask, "How is she?" and not "How is Sarah?" Just then, the emergency room doors swung open. An older doctor, his face etched with fatigue, stepped out. We immediately surrounded him. "Doctor, how is my family member?" Tom asked urgently. The doctor looked at us and shook his head sorrowfully. We did everything we could. The injuries were too severe. The patient didn't make it. My deepest condolences to your family." His words were a death sentence. My legs went weak, and I had to lean against the wall to keep from collapsing. Eleanor let out a piercing shriek and fell into Tom's arms. "As per protocol, we need a family member to make a formal identification," the doctor continued. Tom supported his mother as I staggered behind a nurse into the cold, sterile room. The nurse slowly pulled back the white sheet covering the gurney. My heart stopped. I had braced myself for the most horrific sight, but what lay before me left me so stunned I couldn't speak. The person on the gurney had a face that, despite being disfigured by the accident, still held the traces of youth. Her long, silky hair was now matted with blood. It wasn't me. It was Chloe, my 25-year-old sister-in-law, Chloe Miller. "Chloe! My baby!" Eleanor screamed, a heart-wrenching cry, before fainting. Tom stood frozen, his eyes wide with disbelief and horror. In the midst of the chaos and grief, I didn't cry. I just stood there, my mind a complete blank. And then, through Tom's sobs and the nurse's calls for help, a single phrase uttered by Eleanor as she passed out, a whisper so faint it was almost inaudible, reached my ears. "Why? Why is it, Chloe? It was supposed to be her." That sentence shot through me like a bolt of lightning. Her? Who was her? Why was it supposed to be her? A cold, horrifying seed of suspicion began to sprout in my shattered mind. I looked at the mother weeping for her daughter, at the husband grieving for his sister. But now, in my eyes, they had become strangers, terrifying strangers. A cruel play had just ended, and I realized with chilling certainty that I was the intended lead actress. To understand why that whisper terrified me so, why a mother-in-law who always seemed so proper could utter something so monstrous in the moment of losing her own daughter, I have to take you back 5 years. Back to the day I met Tom Miller and stepped into the marriage I once believed was heaven on earth. I was 25 then, a young architect fresh out of school, full of ambition and passion. I met Tom on a business trip to Napa Valley. He was a partner from the contracting firm. From our very first meeting, I was drawn to him. Tom wasn't just handsome and tall. He had a warm smile and a charming way with words. He always knew how to make me laugh, how to care for me in the smallest ways. He remembered I liked my chamomile tea without sugar, that I was allergic to lily pollen, and even the silly story I once told about my childhood dog. With him, I felt cherished and protected. Tom told me about his family, his hardworking mother, his strict but loving father, and his mischievous younger sister, whom he adored. He painted a picture of a warm, happy family, something I, having lost my own father as a child, had always longed for. When he took me home to meet the Millers, his mother, Eleanor, welcomed me with open arms. She held my hand, praised my beauty and intelligence, and said Tom was lucky to have found me. She spoke of her past struggles, of how she had to work tirelessly to raise Tom and Chloe. She said her only wish was for her children to have happy families, for her son to have a good wife so she could rest easy. Her sincere words and emotional tears made me trust her completely. I thought I was the luckiest woman alive, having found not only a wonderful husband, but also a thoughtful mother-in-law. Our wedding took place just 6 months later, with the blessings of everyone we knew. I still remember that day perfectly. I wore a pristine white wedding gown of my own design, walking down the aisle hand in hand with Tom. He looked at me, his eyes shimmering with love and promises. "From now on," he whispered, "you will be the happiest woman in the world." And I believed him. I believed him with all my heart. Before the wedding, I used all of my personal savings, plus a significant sum my mother had saved her entire life for me, to buy a beautiful villa in a new development in Marina del Rey. That house was my dream, the fruit of my labor, the place where I wanted to build our future. When I suggested putting Tom's name on the deed alongside mine, he refused. He said it was my hard work, and he didn't want to be seen as depending on his wife. All he needed was to be with me. His gesture moved me deeply and solidified my trust in his character. But I didn't listen to him. I insisted that we both be on the title. I naively thought that in a family, there should be no yours or mine, only ours. I didn't know that my own generosity and blind trust were paving the way for a sinister plot. The first few months after the wedding were the sweetest. Tom doted on me. He cooked my favorite meals, took me to movies, and we went for walks every evening. Together, we decorated our villa, hand-picking every piece of furniture and planting every flower in the garden. I thought this was what true happiness felt like. But then, just 2 months later, things began to change. Eleanor and the rest of Tom's family started to shift their behavior. At first, she would just visit occasionally, staying for a few days. Then, the visits became more frequent. She'd complain that their old house was cramped and the air wasn't good for her husband's health. She said Chloe's commute to work was too long and she needed a place closer to the city center. Finally, using the excuse that it would be nice for the whole family to be together, she moved all of her belongings into my villa. Tom's only comment was, "Come on, honey, the house is big enough. It'll be cozier with Mom, Dad, and Chloe here. Just be patient, okay?" I agreed, thinking that caring for one's parents was the right thing to do. I had no idea that it was the first step toward losing control of my own home. My villa, my sanctuary, was no longer just for my husband and me. It became a communal living space, a place where I gradually began to feel like a guest who was responsible for paying for everything. I thought I was building a family, but it turned out I was only building a gilded cage for myself. A cage that, by the time I realized it, was already too late to escape. From the day my in-laws moved in, my life began to change. Slowly but surely, the spacious villa suddenly felt suffocating, not because of the space, but because of the unspoken rules and invisible pressures set by my mother-in-law, Eleanor. She never said anything directly, never scolded me, but her silent glares, her sighs, were enough to make me feel I had done something wrong. I went from being the mistress of the house, the one who had invested nearly all her effort and money into it, to being a daughter-in-law who had to obey every command. Everything had to be her way. The daily menu consisted of dishes she and her husband preferred. The modern art I loved in the living room was gradually replaced by inspirational, quote, art and paintings of tranquil landscapes, which she claimed were better for the house's feng shui and would bring wealth. Tom, of course, never objected. He always sided with his mother, or rather, he chose silence to avoid conflict. "She's getting older, honey. It won't kill us to accommodate her a little," was his go-to phrase whenever I complained. So, I endured. I told myself that as long as the family was harmonious, my small sacrifices were worthwhile. But my sacrifices didn't stop at personal preferences. I gradually became the main financial pillar, or more accurately, the family's personal ATM. My career as an architect was flourishing, major projects kept coming my way, and my income grew substantially. Meanwhile, Tom's construction business was struggling. He claimed the market was tough and competition was fierce. Without a hint of suspicion, I readily used my own money to support him. But that money wasn't just for Tom's business. All the living expenses in the villa, from electricity and water to groceries and the housekeeper's salary, were paid by me alone. Eleanor treated this as a matter of course. She never once asked if I was struggling or tired. She only made demands. "Sarah, our refrigerator is getting old. Let's get a bigger new one." "Sarah, I'm having some friends over this weekend. Make sure you buy some of those expensive imported cheeses they like." "Sarah, it's almost Chloe's birthday. See if you can get her one of those designer bags she wants." Chloe, my sister-in-law, was the one who bothered me the most. At 25, she had no steady job and spent her days dressing up, shopping, and hanging out with friends. All her expenses, from clothes and makeup to lavish vacations, were covered by me. She never called me by my name, let alone sister-in-law. It was always she or her. She was openly envious of my success. "She has it so good, rich and smart. Not like me," she'd often say in front of me, her tone a mix of mockery and jealousy. Once, I bought a new dress for an important company event. Chloe saw it and sneered. "Nice dress. Must have cost a fortune. You're so lucky, Sarah, with more money than you know what to do with." My brother Tom really hit the jackpot, marrying a rich wife. He doesn't have to lift a finger. Her words were like a punch to the gut, but when I looked at Tom, he just gave a weak smile and changed the subject. His silence was a knife to my self-respect. Who was I doing all this for? Wasn't it for him? For the family he called a home? In return, All I received was contempt and the attitude that I was an outsider with an obligation to provide for them. I slowly became a shadow in my own house. I left early and came home late, burying myself in work to earn money to meet the ever-increasing demands of my husband's family. I had no time for myself, no coffee dates with friends, no spontaneous trips. My life revolved around my firm and that cold, imposing villa. Sometimes, late at night, sitting alone at my computer finishing a blueprint, I'd wonder what I was doing. Was this the happy marriage I had dreamed of? But then I'd look at our wedding photo on my desk, see Tom's radiant smile, and I'd console myself. Just hang in there a little longer. Everything will be okay. I didn't know that my patience wasn't making things better. It was only feeding their greed. Until one day, it exploded into an unacceptable demand, the final straw that broke the camel's back. My years of silent suffering and swallowed tears finally reached their breaking point. The incident happened one evening late in the year, as the family was gathered for dinner. The atmosphere was unusually tense. Tom barely said a word, just stared at his plate, sighing occasionally. Eleanor kept glancing from her son to me, her eyes filled with a calculating look. I knew something was wrong. After dinner, as I was clearing the dishes, Eleanor called me into the living room. Tom and his father were already seated there. She cleared her throat and began in a grave tone. "Sarah, sit down. There's something we need to discuss with you." I put down the dish towel and took a seat opposite them. "Yes, Mom? What is it?" Eleanor looked at Tom, signaling for him to speak. He looked up, avoiding my eyes, and mumbled, "Honey, my company. It's in a bit of trouble." "What kind of trouble?" I asked, a sense of dread rising within me. I made a bad investment. It's a pretty big loss. My partners are putting on the pressure. If I can't pay them back, I might have to face legal action." "How big?" My voice grew cold. Tom fell silent. Eleanor, losing her patience, said it plainly. $250,000. He owes them $250,000. Now the creditors are threatening to send collectors to the house if he doesn't pay within a week. $250,000. The number struck me like a bolt of lightning. I stared at Tom, the man I had always trusted. I had been funneling money to him for his business, and now he had brought home this colossal debt. How did this happen? What did you do with all the money I gave you? I tried to control my anger, but my voice trembled. Tom hung his head, not daring to answer. Again, Eleanor spoke up for her precious son. "What's done is done. What's the point of blaming him now? The important thing is to find a solution. Sarah, you're his wife. You're the only one who can save him now." "Me?" I let out a bitter, sarcastic laugh. "Where am I supposed to get $250,000? "I know you have it," Eleanor said, her tone certain. "I know your firm is doing very well. You're the lead architect. All the big projects go through you. I know you have your own savings. Withdraw it and help Tom this one time. Think of it as saving your husband, saving this entire family." So that was it. They had it all figured out. They knew my financial situation, and they were backing me into a corner, forcing me to bear the consequences of Tom's incompetence. I looked at my husband. He was still silent, no explanation, no apology, just cowardice and resignation. A wave of bitterness rose in my throat. For 5 years, I had sacrificed enough. I had worked like a machine to support this family. And for what? For a $250,000 debt and the expectation that it was my responsibility to fix it. No, not this time. I would not give in again. I took a deep breath and looked directly at Eleanor and Tom, my voice surprisingly calm. "Fine. I will help Tom pay off this debt." I saw a flicker of relief cross both of their faces. "However," I continued, my voice firm, "I have one condition." "What condition?" Eleanor asked, a hint of annoyance in her voice. "Starting tomorrow, Tom will quit his job at his contracting firm and come to work at my architectural firm as my assistant. All of his work, all of his business dealings, will be under my supervision. I will not let this happen again." The air in the room froze. Eleanor was speechless. She had never expected me to dare set a condition. Tom's head shot up, his eyes filled with anger and humiliation. "What are you saying? You want me to be your assistant. You want to control me." "That's right," I replied, without hesitation. "If you want me to pay your debt, you accept my terms. You've proven you're incapable of managing finances. From now on, I will be the one making all financial decisions in this family. You. Eleanor was so furious she could barely speak, pointing a trembling finger at me. "How dare you give my son an ultimatum? You're using money to threaten him? Who do you think you are?" "I am his wife." I stood up, looking her straight in the eye. "The person who is about to spend $250,000 to save him from bankruptcy and legal ruin. You don't have to agree, Mom. And Tom, you can refuse. In that case, the two of you can figure out how to solve this problem on your own. Excuse me, I'm going to my room." I turned and walked away, leaving their shock and anger behind me. As I walked up the stairs, I heard Eleanor's voice, low and full of hatred. "You've made your point, but don't think you've won." Her threat didn't scare me. On the contrary, it made me realize my battle had just begun. The glass was now overflowing, and from this day forward, I would no longer be the submissive Sarah of the past. After that fiery confrontation, a tense silence enveloped our villa. Tom and his mother, though furious and humiliated, ultimately had to accept my condition. A $250,000 debt was too large for them to handle on their own. They knew no one else could bail Tom out. I kept my word. I used a significant portion of my savings to clear Tom's debt. The price he paid was giving up his sham director title and obediently coming to work at my firm. I placed him in the project management department, where his construction background was relevant. But every report, every proposal, had to be approved by me. I wasn't doing it to humiliate him. I was doing it to protect my own assets and prevent similar mistakes in the future. The first few weeks were suffocating. Tom came to work looking like he was attending a funeral. He was sullen, quiet, and avoided me both at the office and at home. As for Eleanor, she treated me like her sworn enemy. She no longer criticized my cooking or housekeeping. Instead, she used silence as a weapon of her contempt. She would walk past me like I was invisible, without a greeting or even a glance. Family dinners became an ordeal of silent chewing, the clinking of utensils echoing in the cold atmosphere. I knew they hated me. They hated me for disrupting the old order, for daring to take back control. But I didn't care. I had endured enough. All I wanted was a peaceful life, free from the constant worry of debts falling from the sky. But the peace I craved was short-lived. After about a month of silence, I started noticing disturbing signs, ominous omens that crept into every corner of the house. Though Eleanor maintained her cold exterior, her actions became very strange. She began making secret phone calls. Whenever her phone rang, she would rush outside to the garden or into her room to answer, whispering so quietly I couldn't make out the words. Once, I happened to walk by and saw her talking to someone, her expression tense. "Just do as I said," she hissed. "Be discreet. Don't let her find out." Hearing my footsteps, she flinched, quickly hung up, and walked away. Her, of course, had to be me. What was she plotting behind my back? Not only that, but we started having strange visitors. They were rough-looking men, covered in tattoos. They never came inside, just stood at the gate talking to Eleanor for a few minutes before leaving hastily. Each time, Eleanor would slip a thick envelope into their hands. When I asked Tom who they were, he brushed it off, saying they were old friends of his mother's. But what kind of friends looked so menacing and only visited late at night? Tom became different too. He was no longer sullen and irritable. Instead, he seemed incredibly anxious and restless. He startled easily and tossed and turned at night, muttering in his sleep. One night, I heard him whisper, "No, don't do it. It's too dangerous." I shook him awake and asked what he was dreaming about. He denied everything and turned his back to me. But I knew he was hiding something from me, something terrible. My anxiety grew daily. I felt like I was living in a trap that was slowly closing around me. Everyone, from my mother-in-law to my husband, was wearing a mask. We ate at the same table and lived under the same roof, but behind my back, they were plotting something I couldn't comprehend. I considered installing security cameras, but was afraid of what I might discover. I told myself to be cautious, to pay attention to everything. I started locking our bedroom door at night and carefully checking my food and drinks. I no longer trusted anyone in this house. One evening, while working in my study, I overheard Tom and his mother arguing in the living room. It was the first time I had ever heard Tom raise his voice to her. "Mom, I'm begging you, stop! This plan won't work. If she finds out, our lives will be ruined." "What do you know?" Eleanor snapped. "She's already walking all over us. If we don't teach her a lesson, she'll kick us all out onto the street. Everything is arranged. All you have to do is keep your mouth shut and do as I say." The argument ended with a door slamming. Tom left, and Eleanor sat alone in the living room, her heavy sighs filling the silence. I sat in my room, a chill running down my spine. "Teach me a lesson. Everything is arranged." Her words echoed in my head. A plan was in motion, a plan targeting me, and it was so dangerous that even the spineless Tom had tried to intervene. What was I to do? Call the police? I had no proof. Confront them? They would deny everything. I felt helpless and utterly alone. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay awake, trying to piece together all the recent strange events. And then, a detail came to mind. My car. Lately, whenever I drove home from work, the steering felt slightly heavier than usual. At first, I dismissed it as low tire pressure, but now a terrifying thought flashed through my mind. Could it be? Had they tampered with my car? That horrifying thought that someone had tampered with my car haunted me all night. I didn't dare to dwell on it, because if it were true, their cruelty surpassed anything I could imagine. The next morning, I decided not to drive to work. I told the family the car seemed to have a problem and needed to be taken in for service. I saw a flicker of confusion in Eleanor's eyes, but she quickly hid it. "Oh, you have to be careful with cars. Just take a taxi. Tom can take it to the garage for you," she said, her voice unnervingly casual. I mumbled an agreement and left. I couldn't focus on work all day. Images of a horrific accident kept playing in my mind. I called an old friend who worked in the automotive industry and asked him to recommend a trustworthy and discreet mechanic. I couldn't take it to the garage Tom always used. I needed a place where I could get an honest assessment. That evening, after work, I secretly went to the garage my friend recommended. I told the owner, a kind-faced, middle-aged man, about my suspicions. He listened intently and nodded seriously. "Don't you worry, ma'am. Leave the car here. We'll check everything thoroughly, from the brakes and steering to every single bolt. If there's anything unusual, we'll let you know immediately." I left the car with a heavy heart, half hoping I was just being paranoid and half terrified my instincts were correct. The tense, silent charade at home continued. Tom and Eleanor never mentioned the car. They acted as if nothing was out of the ordinary, and their calmness only heightened my anxiety. And then, the fateful morning arrived. The day tragedy struck my family. It was a Friday morning. I was in the kitchen when Chloe, my sister-in-law, came downstairs looking rushed. She was wearing a new dress and had her makeup done perfectly. "Sarah, I'm in a huge hurry. Can I please borrow your car for a bit?" she asked, her voice sweet and pleading. I froze. Alarm bells went off in my head. "My car's at the garage for maintenance, Chloe. Didn't you know?" I tried to refuse gently. "Huh? Tom told me he picked it up yesterday," Chloe replied, looking surprised. "I saw it parked in the driveway." I was stunned. Tom had brought the car home without telling me. He had lied. "Please, Sarah," Chloe begged. "I have a really important job interview. I can't take my scooter. I promise I'll be careful and come right back." Just then, Tom walked out of his room. He had overheard us. "Oh, let her take it, honey," he said, in that same placating tone as always. "She's in a jam. If you don't, Mom will get upset." He was pressuring me. I looked at Tom, searching his eyes for a hint of concern, of worry. But there was nothing, only urgency, and something that looked like anticipation. My heart felt like it was being squeezed in a vice. I knew if I refused, Eleanor would cause a scene, and I had no valid reason to say no. I couldn't just say I suspected them of sabotaging my car. I was trapped. "Please?" Chloe tugged at my arm playfully. Finally, I sighed and pulled the car keys from my purse. "All right, just be careful, okay?" I said, my voice barely a whisper. I didn't know if I was doing the right thing. I only knew that in that moment, I was tired of the arguments, tired of the invisible pressure in this house. Chloe let out a happy cheer, snatched the keys, and ran outside. Tom looked at me, a faint smile on his lips. "See? That's better," he said. I didn't reply. I just stood and watched as my car slowly pulled out of the driveway. A profound sense of dread washed over me. I noticed Chloe was wearing a large face mask and oversized sunglasses that covered most of her face. She looked so different. I barely saw her wave before the car turned onto the main road and disappeared. I stood, rooted to the spot for a long time, my heart heavy with a strange foreboding. I felt as if I had just sent someone off on a journey with no return. I tried to dismiss the crazy thought, telling myself I was being overly sensitive, too paranoid, but the feeling of unease lingered, haunting me all morning. And then, that afternoon, the fateful call from the highway patrol confirmed my worst fears. The cruelest play had been performed, but the lead actress was not the one the director had intended. Chloe's death was like a bomb exploding in the heart of our already fractured family. The funeral was held in a heavy, somber atmosphere. Eleanor wailed, crying out her daughter's name in despair. Tom was a silent, brooding figure with red, swollen eyes. To any outsider, they were a family enduring an unimaginable loss. But I, standing in the midst of this tragic scene, couldn't shed a tear. The initial shock and grief had quickly been replaced by a deep-seated suspicion and an all-consuming fear. Eleanor's words at the hospital, "It was supposed to be her," were like a knife twisting in my mind. Every time I saw her tears, I wondered, was she crying for her lost daughter or for a failed plan? I decided I had to continue playing my part. I had to be the grieving sister-in-law, the devastated wife, in order to observe them and uncover the truth. I cried. I appeared haggard and heartbroken. I managed all the funeral arrangements meticulously, from greeting guests to overseeing the rites, without a single complaint. I wanted them to believe I was still the same old Sarah, the obedient, easily fooled daughter-in-law, and my performance worked. After the initial days of grief, Tom and Eleanor seemed to regain their composure. They started treating me with a strange kindness. Tom was no longer cold and irritable. He stayed by my side, held my hand, and offered words of comfort. "Sarah, I'm so sorry. I've been so thoughtless lately. It's just us now. We have to lean on each other." Eleanor, too, dropped her icy distance. She would bring me bowls of hot chicken soup. "Eat this, dear. You need your strength. You've been through so much. Chloe is gone. Now you're the only daughter I have left." Their sudden attentiveness didn't move me. It disgusted me. I knew it was all an act, a performance designed to cover up a horrific crime. They were trying to appease me, to lull me into a false sense of security so I would drop my suspicions. But they were mistaken. The more they acted, the more they revealed their flaws. I noticed that whenever someone mentioned the cause of the accident, Tom and Eleanor would quickly change the subject. The CHP's initial conclusion was that Chloe had lost control of the vehicle, but my in-laws showed no interest in a deeper investigation. They accepted the finding far too easily. Once, a relative innocently asked, "Why was Chloe on the I-5 at that time of day? I thought she had an interview in downtown LA." Eleanor immediately snapped, "She's gone. What's the point of asking so many questions? She probably had to run an errand on the way." Her reaction was completely abnormal. Shouldn't a mother who just lost her child be the most desperate to find out the exact cause of her death? That night, after everyone was asleep, I snuck into Tom's home office. I knew his computer password. I opened his web browser history, and what I found made my blood run cold. He had searched for how to sabotage a car's brake system without leaving a trace, traffic accidents caused by technical failure, and inheritance laws for surviving spouses. The searches were dated approximately 1 week before the accident. My hands trembled. It was all crystal clear. This wasn't an accident. It was a premeditated murder, and I was the target. Chloe was just an unintended victim. They wanted to kill me, to seize my assets, my villa, the company I had built from the ground up. Love, family, it was all a lie. I was nothing more than a golden goose in their eyes. I collapsed onto the floor, a wave of nausea rising in my throat. I had been living with monsters disguised as humans. I had loved a murderer. What should I do? Go to the police? The browser history wasn't concrete proof. They would claim it was just morbid curiosity. I needed more. I needed irrefutable evidence. I crept back into the bedroom and lay down next to Tom. He was sleeping soundly, his breathing even. I stared at the face of the man I once loved, a feeling of utter hatred welling up inside me. I would not let him and his mother get away with this. I would make them pay for their crime. The charade had to continue. I would keep playing the part of the grief-stricken wife, but in the shadows, I would become someone else, someone seeking justice for herself and for the wronged soul of Chloe. Their play had an unexpected ending. Now, my play was just beginning. I moved through the following days like a sleepwalker. By day, I was a wife and sister-in-law lost in grief. I spoke little, rarely smiled, and my eyes were always shadowed with sorrow. I allowed Tom and Eleanor to coddle and comfort me, letting them believe I was completely broken with no capacity for suspicion. But when night fell and the villa sank into silence, I became a different person. I didn't sleep. I sat alone in the dark, piecing together every detail, every word, every action. The initial fear had subsided, replaced by an ice-cold calm. I knew I couldn't do this alone. I needed help from someone smart, sharp, and, most importantly, completely trustworthy. I immediately thought of Jessica. Jessica Evans, my best and only true friend from college. Jess was no ordinary woman. She was a renowned litigator in Los Angeles, specializing in complex criminal cases. She was intelligent, tough, and had nerves of steel. She was the only one I could trust now. But how could I contact her without Tom and Eleanor finding out? They were surely monitoring my phone. I needed a plausible excuse to leave the house alone. The opportunity came on a Sunday morning. I told Tom I wanted to go to a yoga retreat for the day to find some peace for my soul. He didn't suspect a thing. In fact, he was sympathetic. "You should go, honey. It's not good for you to be cooped up here. Do you want me to drive you?" "No, I want to be alone," I replied weakly. I took a taxi, but not to the retreat. I had the driver take me to a large shopping mall. I went into a phone store and bought a new smartphone and a prepaid SIM card. Then I found a secluded corner in the bustling food court, the loudest place I could find, and dialed Jessica's number, my heart pounding. "Hello?" Jessica's voice on the other end was as crisp as ever. "Jess, it's me. Sarah," I whispered. There was a short pause. Then her tone became serious. "Sarah, where are you? Why are you calling from this number? I've been trying to reach you for days." "I know," I cut her off. "I know what everyone is thinking. But I'm okay. I need to see you, Jess. It's urgent. Something terrible has happened." Jessica didn't ask questions. She just said decisively, "Where are you? Send me your location. I'm on my way." Half an hour later, Jessica appeared. She looked the same as always in her stylish business suit, with her sharp pixie cut and eyes that could see right through you. She frowned when she saw my disheveled appearance. Without a word, she led me to a quiet cafe and chose a table in the farthest corner. "Okay," she said, her tone that of a lawyer taking a deposition. "Tell me everything," slowly. I took a deep breath and began. I told her everything from the CHP's phone call and Eleanor's whisper at the hospital to Tom's search history. I didn't cry. My voice was flat, emotionless, as if I were narrating someone else's story. Jessica listened in silence, never interrupting. Her eyes grew harder and colder with every word. When I finished, she sat quietly for a long moment, her long fingers tapping gently on the tabletop. "Sarah," she finally said, "if what you're saying is true, this is no longer a traffic accident. This is premeditated murder. And the people you're living with aren't your family. They're criminals." "I know," I replied, my voice hoarse. "But I have no proof, Jess. It's all just my suspicion." "The browser history is not suspicion," Jessica countered. "It's crucial circumstantial evidence. But you're right, we need more. We need direct evidence, a confession, or something undeniable." She looked me straight in the eye, her gaze resolute. "Sarah, listen to me. From this moment on, you must remain absolutely calm. You must continue to play the part of the weak, grieving victim. The more you lower their guard, the better our chances. I will start investigating. I have my own sources. I'll find out about the garage your husband used. I'll identify the strange men who met with your mother-in-law. I will turn over every stone." She took my hand and squeezed it tightly. "But you have to promise me one thing. Do not act alone. Tell me everything, no matter how small. You're dealing with wolves. One small mistake could cost you your life." I nodded, tears finally welling in my eyes. For the first time in days of fear and solitude, I felt I had someone to lean on. "Thank you, Jess. That's what friends are for." She smiled, a rare but warm smile. "Now, go home. And remember, make your performance convincing. Think of it as a high-stakes chess game. And I promise you, we are going to win." Leaving the cafe, I felt a huge weight lift from my shoulders. I was no longer alone. This was now a two-player game, and with a queen like Jessica by my side, I believed the day the truth came to light was not far off. Returning from my meeting with Jessica, I felt a new, invisible strength coursing through me. The fear and helplessness were gone, replaced by a cold determination essential for the fight ahead. I perfected my role as the grief-stricken wife. I let Tom and Eleanor console me, allowing them to believe I was completely taken in by their fake concern. My apparent gullibility made them let down their guard. They resumed their old habits, the secret calls, the clandestine meetings, but they didn't know that every move they made was now under the watchful eyes of me and Jessica. Jessica, true to her word, acted swiftly and professionally. She was like a ghost, silently infiltrating the darkest corners of my in-laws' lives. Her first move was to investigate Eleanor's finances. "In any criminal case, follow the money," Jessica had told me. Money doesn't lie. Through a contact at a bank, Jessica secretly obtained Eleanor's complete transaction records for the past 3 months. The results were just as we'd suspected. About 10 days before the accident, a large sum of money, exactly $25,000, had been withdrawn in cash from Eleanor's savings account. This was highly unusual for Eleanor, who was notoriously frugal and guarded her money jealously. What did she need that much cash for? $25,000, Jessica said to me over the phone, her voice laced with irony. "Not a cheap price to stage an accident, but cash is hard to trace. We need to know where it went." The investigation seemed to hit a dead end, but Jessica wasn't one to give up. She shifted her focus to the shady men I had described. Using the blurry images I managed to extract from a neighbor's security camera at the end of our street, Jessica had a friend in law enforcement run an identification. A name came back, Rico Vargas, known on the street as Scar. He was a notorious enforcer for a local gang with a rap sheet for assault and extortion. Most importantly, he had just been released from prison a few months ago. The pieces were falling into place. A frugal old woman suddenly withdraws $25,000 to pay a recently released gangster. A fatal car accident occurs shortly after. The connection was obvious. But how could we prove that the money went to Rico? That was the key. "We need a witness or physical evidence," Jessica said. While Jessica was working on connecting the dots, I wasn't idle. I continued my performance, trying to coax information out of Tom. I knew he was the weakest link. His cowardice and guilt had to be eating him alive. One evening, when it was just the two of us in our room, I rested my head on his shoulder and said sadly, "Honey, I keep thinking about Chloe. It was all so sudden. I still can't believe she's gone." Tom flinched slightly. He was quiet for a moment before patting my shoulder. "Try not to think about it, Sarah. What's done is done." "But I feel so guilty," I went on. "I shouldn't have let her borrow the car that morning. If I hadn't, maybe none of this would have happened." I felt his body tense up. He said nothing, just let out a long sigh. I knew I had struck a nerve. I pressed on. "I heard the police ruled it as losing control of the car, but something feels wrong. The car was just serviced." "How could the steering fail like that?" "Don't think such crazy things," Tom snapped, a hint of panic in his voice. The CHP made their conclusion. "What more do you want?" His defensiveness confirmed my suspicions. I decided to deliver the final blow. I looked up at him, my eyes filled with tears. "Tom, are you and your mother hiding something from me? I'm your wife. Whatever it is, I deserve to know the truth." Tom avoided my gaze. He stood up and paced the room. "There's nothing to hide. You're tired. Let's just go to sleep." He was lying, and his clumsy lie was a confession in itself. I knew I couldn't force the truth out of him right then, but I had planted a seed of doubt in his mind. He was starting to worry that I knew something. And when people are afraid, they make mistakes. Just as I predicted, a few days later, Tom made a fatal error, one that led us closer to the horrifying truth. While Jessica focused on the money trail and the gangster, Rico Scar Vargas, I pursued a different line of inquiry, one born from the contradictions in my in-laws' stories. I couldn't stop wondering why Chloe was on the I-5 freeway that morning. Eleanor claimed she was going to a job interview in downtown LA, but the I-5 north heads in the opposite direction. A relative had mentioned Chloe was meeting a friend in Santa Barbara, but no one knew who this friend was. All the information was conflicting and vague. I felt they were deliberately hiding something about Chloe's schedule that day. I had to find out the truth myself. I knew the key lay in her personal belongings, but after the funeral, Eleanor had cleared out Chloe's room, storing everything away. There was no way for me to get to it. However, they had overlooked one thing: the tablet Chloe always used. It wasn't in her room. She usually left it in the living room, perhaps thinking it held nothing important. No one had paid it any mind. One afternoon, while Tom was at work and Eleanor was taking a nap, I snuck the tablet into my room and locked the door. My heart pounded. I felt like I was committing a crime, but my desire for the truth was stronger. Luckily, Chloe hadn't set a password. I turned it on and scrolled through her apps. Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, nothing out of the ordinary. Just photos of parties, shopping sprees, and trivial chats with friends. I started to feel disappointed. But just as I was about to turn it off, the calendar app caught my eye. I opened it. There, on Friday, the day of the accident, was an entry marked as important. I tapped on it. The details made me gasp. A.M. Apt W. Dr. Peterson, at Eva Aesthetics, A.M. Rhinoplasty, a cosmetic surgery clinic. So that was the real reason. Chloe had lied to everyone. She wasn't going to an interview or meeting a friend. She was getting a nose job. Eva Aesthetics. I quickly searched for it online. The address was in a high-end medical plaza in Beverly Hills, right off the I-5. Everything suddenly made sense. Chloe had driven there alone, and to avoid being recognized, she had worn a face mask and large sunglasses. That disguise, combined with the fact that she was driving my car, had caused the hitmen to mistake her for me. A cruel, tragic coincidence. I sat in silence, a wave of sadness for Chloe washing over me. She was just a young woman who wanted to feel more beautiful, and that desire had inadvertently led her to her death. But then, another thought struck me. If Chloe was going for cosmetic surgery, why would her family hide it? Why invent stories about interviews and friends? Plastic surgery isn't such a taboo that it needs to be concealed so desperately, unless there was another reason. I went back to the tablet and opened her email app, and there I found the answer. There was an email from Eva Aesthetics confirming her appointment and the cost of the procedure. But what caught my eye was a small note at the bottom. Payment has been processed. Billed to Mr. Thomas Miller. Tom, my husband. He knew Chloe was getting surgery. He was the one who paid for it, and he never said a word to me. He and his mother had concocted a web of lies to hide the truth. Why? What was he so afraid of? I tried to connect the dots. Tom knew Chloe was going to the clinic. He knew she would borrow my car. He knew she would be disguised. And he also knew that on the road to that clinic, a deadly trap was waiting. I couldn't bear to think any further. The truth was too monstrous. It showed that Tom wasn't just an accomplice. He was a cold-blooded monster. He knew about the plan to kill me, but not only did he fail to stop it, he indirectly facilitated it. He had sacrificed his own sister to protect himself and cover up his crime. I sank to the floor, the tablet clattering beside me. The pain and rage were overwhelming. I had thought he was merely weak and cowardly, but he was more cruel and wicked than his own mother. I had to expose him. I had to make him pay. I took screenshots of the email and the calendar appointment and sent them to Jessica immediately. A few minutes later, she called back, her voice filled with a mixture of shock and fury. "My God, Sarah. That bastard. He's not even human. I can't believe it." "Neither can I, Jess," I said, my voice hoarse. "But now is not the time for grief. I need you to do something for me." "Name it." "I want you to use this evidence to pressure Tom. I want him to confess, in his own words," I said, my voice as cold as ice. "I want to hear him admit his crimes before I hand everything over to the police. It's the last chance I'm giving him a chance to be a man before he's a monster forever." The plan to pressure Tom was meticulously crafted by Jessica and me. We knew he was a coward. What he feared most wasn't prison, but the loss of his reputation and the judgment of his peers. We would strike at that weakness. As a lawyer, Jessica drafted a formal legal notice. She didn't send it to Tom directly, but to the company where he worked, my company. The letter didn't explicitly mention murder. It vaguely referred to unresolved questions surrounding the death of Miss Chloe Miller and Mr. Miller's potential involvement. It requested a private meeting between Tom and the legal counsel for the victim's family, May, to clarify these matters. It concluded by stating that a failure to cooperate would compel us to release all information to the authorities and the media. It was a brilliant psychological blow. A letter like that arriving at his workplace would immediately raise suspicion among his colleagues and superiors. The career and reputation he desperately clung to would be threatened. He would panic and be forced to come to us. Sure enough, a day after the letter was sent, Tom called me, his voice a frantic mix of anger and fear. "Sarah, what the hell are you doing? Why would you send a letter like that to my office? Are you trying to ruin me?" I replied calmly, my voice cold. "I just want the truth about Chloe's death. You're her brother. Don't you want to know the truth?" "What truth? The CHP already closed the case," he yelled. "Does their conclusion give you peace of mind?" I countered. "If you're truly innocent, why would you be afraid of a conversation with a lawyer?" Tom went silent. I knew I had hit a nerve. I continued, my tone softening slightly, offering a final chance. "Tomorrow, 3 p.m., Jessica's office. Come alone. We'll talk this through one last time. If you don't show up, I'll assume you're refusing to cooperate, and I'll proceed accordingly." I hung up, giving him no chance to argue. I knew he would come. He had no other choice. The next day, I was waiting in Jessica's conference room. She sat beside me, her expression stern. A tiny, hidden camera was positioned in the corner to record everything. At exactly 3 p.m., Tom arrived. He looked haggard and sleep-deprived, with dark circles under his eyes. He sat opposite us, his hands clasped on the table, fingers twisting nervously. "All right," he began, his voice trembling. "What do you two want?" Jessica didn't answer. She simply pushed a folder across the table toward him. Tom frowned and opened it. The first page was a screenshot of his browser history. The second was the bank statement showing Eleanor's $25,000 cash withdrawal. The final page was the screenshot of Chloe's cosmetic surgery confirmation email with the line, "Billed to Mr. Thomas Miller," circled in red. The color drained from Tom's face. He looked up at us, his eyes wide with panic. Where did you get these?" "That doesn't matter," Jessica said, her voice sharp as glass. "What matters is that you answer our questions. You knew about your mother's plan, didn't you?" Tom was silent, sweat beading on his forehead. "You knew Chloe was going to borrow Sarah's car that day," Jessica pressed on. "You knew she was going to that clinic. You knew a deadly trap was waiting for her on that freeway. And you did nothing. You stayed silent. You let your own sister drive to her death." Her words were like hammer blows, shattering Tom's fragile composure. "No, I didn't," Tom screamed, burying his face in his hands. "I tried to stop her. I told my mother it was wrong, but she wouldn't listen. She said if I didn't keep my mouth shut, she would disown me. I didn't know what to do. So you chose your mother. You chose silence over saving your sister. And your wife," I said, my voice filled with disgust and disappointment. "Your silence, Tom, is even crueler than your mother's actions. She was the mastermind, but you were the accomplice who handed her the knife." Tom broke down, sobbing like a coward. He slumped over the table, his shoulders shaking. I'm sorry, Sarah. I know I was wrong. I was too scared to face it. I was afraid of losing everything. Losing you, making my mother angry. Between choked sobs, he confessed everything. He described how Eleanor had grown to hate me after I took financial control, viewing me as a threat that needed to be eliminated. She had sought out Rico Scar Vargas, paid him $25,000, and given him details about my car and my daily commute. The plan was to stage an accident on a deserted stretch of the freeway to make it look like a technical failure. Tom knew it all, but his cowardice and selfishness paralyzed him. I thought, he whispered, a final, horrifying confession. I thought if you were gone, I would inherit everything. I would have money, and I wouldn't have to live in your shadow anymore. But I never thought the one to die would be Chloe. I sat in stunned silence. The rage was gone, replaced by a bottomless revulsion. Jessica switched off the recording device. It was more than enough. Tom's confession was the final, irrefutable piece of evidence. You just signed a death warrant for your mother. And for yourself, Jessica said, her voice like ice. Tom looked up, his eyes vacant. He understood. He was trapped, but he had no idea that this was only the beginning of his reckoning. We wouldn't stop with his confession. We were setting a bigger trap to catch the shark still lurking in the deep. Tom's confession gave us our sharpest weapon, but Jessica and I agreed it wasn't enough. Tom was just a pawn, a cowardly accomplice. The true mastermind, Eleanor, had not yet confessed. She would surely deny everything and pin all the blame on her son to save herself. We needed a confession from her own lips, evidence that would be undeniable in court. To get it, we needed a trap, a perfectly staged play she would never suspect. She's a cunning old fox, Jessica analyzed. We can't confront her directly. We have to prey on her greatest fear. What's her greatest fear? I asked. Loss and punishment, Jessica replied, a sharp smile playing on her lips. She's already lost her daughter. Now, she's terrified of losing her son and her freedom. We'll use that fear as bait. The plan was set. We would use Tom, her darling son, as the key piece in our endgame. After his confession, Tom was completely broken. Jessica had him detained in a secure, private location, completely cut off from the outside world. No phone, no contact with anyone. His sudden disappearance was guaranteed to make Eleanor frantic. 2 days later, with Eleanor in a panic, Jessica had an associate accidentally leak information to her that Tom was in trouble with some loan sharks over a gambling debt. It was a plausible lie that would make her believe her son was in real danger. Simultaneously, playing the part of the oblivious wife, I made my move. I called Eleanor, my voice filled with manufactured worry. Mom, Tom's been gone for 2 days. He's not answering his phone. I'm so worried. On the other end, Eleanor's voice was also anxious, but I could tell she was hiding something. I don't know where he is, dear. Maybe it was a last-minute business trip. Don't worry too much. She was lying to placate me. But I hesitated deliberately. I think he might be in some kind of trouble. Someone called the house asking for money. Mom. They sounded dangerous. What? Who told you that? Eleanor's voice rose in alarm. I don't know. They just called and made threats. Mom, I'm scared. I started to sob into the phone. My performance was a success. I had planted the seed of chaos in her mind. She now believed her son was not just missing but was being hunted by criminals. Her fear had reached its peak. It was time to set the hook. That evening, Eleanor received a call from an untraceable number. The voice on the other end was deep, gravelly, and threatening. It was Rico Scar Vargas. Jessica had found and made a deal with him, a sum of money and a promise of a plea deal in exchange for his cooperation. Eleanor Miller? Rico's voice growled. Your son Tom is with me. That 25 grand you gave me only covered half the job. Now your daughter's dead. Your daughter-in-law is still alive, and this whole thing is blowing up in my face. What are you going to do about it? Eleanor was speechless. What do you want? She stammered. Another 100,000, Rico demanded, for me to clean up this mess and disappear. If not, I'm taking all my evidence to the cops, and when I do, it won't just be me going down. Your precious boy will be right there with me. He hung up, leaving Eleanor with an impossible choice. We knew she didn't have that kind of money, but we also knew she would do anything to save her son. The trap was perfectly set. All that was left was for the old fox to walk right into it. We arranged a meeting between Eleanor and Rico at an abandoned warehouse on the outskirts of the city, a place desolate enough for her to feel it was secure. But she had no idea that every corner of that warehouse was rigged with hidden cameras and microphones. She would walk in as a mother trying to save her son and walk out as a criminal with no escape. That night, the abandoned warehouse was shrouded in an eerie silence. The wind whistled through gaps in the corrugated metal walls, creating a mournful, groaning sound. Pale moonlight streamed through broken windows, casting long, ghostly shadows across the dusty floor. It was the perfect stage for the final act of a tragedy. Jessica and I sat in a nondescript van parked behind a thicket of overgrown bushes about 100 yards away. A laptop on Jessica's lap displayed the black and white feed from 4 hidden infrared cameras covering every angle of the warehouse. The audio from the listening devices was crystal clear through our earphones. My heart hammered against my ribs. This was it, all or nothing. Right on time, a taxi pulled up at the edge of the dirt road. Eleanor got out, clutching a black duffel bag that looked heavy. She was wearing a dark, hooded coat, her movements furtive as she scanned her surroundings like a cornered animal. After a moment of hesitation, she crept toward the warehouse. "Showtime," Jessica whispered, adjusting the camera focus. The rusted iron door groaned open. Rico was waiting inside. He sat on a stack of old tires, smoking a cigarette, his cold eyes fixed on Eleanor. Under the single, dim bulb hanging from the ceiling, he looked every bit the ruthless gangster. "Right on time," he said, his voice a low growl as he exhaled a plume of smoke. "Where's the money?" Eleanor, trembling, placed the bag on the floor. "Here. This is all I could get. It's $20,000. Please, take it and let my son go. He's all I have left." Her voice was a desperate plea. Rico let out a chilling laugh that echoed in the vast, empty space. He stood up, walked over, and kicked the bag, sending stacks of cash spilling across the filthy floor. "20,000? Are you kidding me? You think your son's life and your freedom are worth a lousy 20 grand? What am I, a charity case? I swear, I don't have any more," Eleanor sobbed, clasping her hands together. "My daughter-in-law controls everything now. She has all the savings. There's no way for me to get more. Please, have mercy." "Daughter-in-law," Rico sneered, playing his part perfectly. "Ah, the architect, the one you paid me to teach a lesson. I'll give her this. She's lucky. The one in the ground right now was supposed to be her, not your daughter. A real unfortunate mix-up." At the mention of the plan, the color drained from Eleanor's face. She collapsed to her knees on the dirty floor, grabbing at Rico's pant leg. "Please, I'm begging you." "It was my fault. All my fault. I was wrong. I just wanted to scare her. I never thought. My daughter is dead now. It's my punishment. Please, just let Tom go. He's my only son. I'll do anything. Just let him go." In her panic and terror, she confessed everything. She poured out her hatred for me, her plan to have Rico stage a fatal accident on the freeway, and the agony of realizing her scheme had killed her own daughter. I thought if she was gone, Tom would inherit everything, she choked out between sobs. He'd have money, status. He wouldn't have to live in his wife's shadow anymore. Everything I did because I love my son. What mother doesn't want the best for her child? Sitting in the van, listening to her confession, I didn't feel the triumph I expected. I only felt a strange, hollow sadness. A mother, blinded by a selfish and twisted love, had turned into a monster, destroying another's happiness and ultimately her own family. "You love your son?" Rico's voice was mocking. He leaned down, staring into her tear-streaked face. "What about your daughter-in-law? What did she ever do to you? Or was it just that she was too successful, too smart, and made your useless son look pathetic in comparison?" Rico's words, though part of the script, struck Eleanor to the core. She had no reply, only desperate, hopeless sobs. The conversation lasted for nearly half an hour. Every detail of the plot, every sordid motive was laid bare, and it was all captured on camera. When we had enough, Jessica gave me a nod. My hand shaking, I pressed a pre-programmed number on my phone. Instantly, from all four sides of the warehouse, police floodlights blazed to life, turning night into day. The piercing wail of sirens ripped through the silence, growing closer by the second. Eleanor and Rico froze, blinking in the blinding light. A moment later, tactical police units swarmed in from all directions. LAPD, hands in the air, don't move. Eleanor was paralyzed. She saw me and Jessica step calmly out of the shadows. Her expression shifted from confusion to horror, and finally to utter despair. She understood. It was a trap, a perfect trap, and she had walked right into it. She didn't scream or struggle. She just crumpled to the floor, weeping like a child caught in a lie. The tears of a late repentance for a crime whose price could never be negotiated. The night Eleanor was arrested marked the end of the darkness, but it was the beginning of a highly publicized legal process. Her recorded confession, combined with Tom's testimony and Rico's cooperation, formed an ironclad case. The district attorney's office moved swiftly. Eleanor was charged with conspiracy and murder, while Tom faced charges as an accomplice and for obstruction of justice. The case became a media sensation, a modern tragedy of greed, jealousy, and a mother's toxic love that had turned monstrous. I stepped away from the spotlight, providing my testimony and evidence to the authorities and leaving the rest to justice. I followed the trial through Jessica, who represented me in court. I chose not to attend. I couldn't bear to see them as defendants, to listen to the grim recounting of their crimes. On the day of the verdict, I was in my office, having thrown myself back into my work. Jessica called me as soon as the judge's gavel fell. Her voice was tired but relieved. "It's over, Sarah. Justice is served." Eleanor was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. For his cooperation, Tom received a sentence of 15 years. Rico and his associates received lengthy prison terms as well. I felt no joy, no satisfaction, only a profound emptiness. A family had destroyed itself from within. I had won, but it was a victory that tasted of ashes. In the months that followed, I began to rebuild. I sold the villa in Marina del Rey, a place now haunted by betrayal. I bought a penthouse apartment downtown, a space I designed myself to be filled with light and open skies. I needed a fresh start. My company stabilized, and my partners, knowing the full story, rallied around me with more support than ever. They saw me not as a victim, but as a survivor. One afternoon, a woman approached me in a cafe. "Are you Sarah Thompson?" she asked timidly. She introduced herself as Chloe's older sister, who had been living abroad. I never even knew she existed. "I came back as soon as I heard," she said, her eyes welling with tears. "I wanted to thank you for not giving up, for bringing the truth to light. Without you, my sister's death would have just been another statistic." She told me about a different Chloe, one trapped under Eleanor's thumb, desperate to live her own life. The plastic surgery had been an act of rebellion. "And I want to apologize," she whispered, "on behalf of my mother and my brother, for all the pain they caused you. My family owes you an apology." That conversation helped heal a part of me I thought was broken forever. I realized that in this tragedy, there were no real winners. We were all victims of a love that had been twisted into something ugly and destructive. 3 years later, my life is unrecognizable. I stepped back from the relentless pace of my firm, selling most of my shares and taking on an advisory role. I moved out of the city to a small, quiet house with a garden overlooking the ocean. I learned to live slowly, to find joy in simple things. But my most meaningful work has been establishing a charitable foundation I named the Green Hope Foundation. We quietly offer support to women who are victims of domestic abuse and familial betrayal. We provide them with legal aid, psychological counseling, and job training, helping them stand on their own 2 feet. Jessica serves on the board, offering pro bono legal advice. Chloe's sister is now the foundation's executive director, turning her family's tragedy into a force for good. I no longer harbor any hatred for Tom or Eleanor. I only hope that in the silence of their prison cells, they can find some semblance of remorse. One evening, Jessica visited me, bringing a bouquet of sunflowers, my favorite. We sat on my porch, watching the sunset paint the sky in hues of orange and pink. "Do you ever regret it?" she asked softly. "Meeting him? The marriage?" I thought for a long moment, a sense of peace settling over me. "No," I finally said, my voice steady. "I don't regret it. It was a painful, devastating lesson, but it taught me that true happiness doesn't come from a man or a family. It comes from within, from self-respect, freedom, and the ability to love yourself. And," I turned to her, a genuine smile on my face, "it taught me that no matter how cruel life gets, there will always be good people by your side. Like you." She squeezed my hand. We sat in comfortable silence, two friends watching the day end. The past was behind me, a nightmare I had survived. Ahead was a new path, bathed in sunlight, filled with the quiet rustle of green hope. I had found my peace.